It is crunch time inside the Beltway right now for health reform. But that has not stopped the fascinating outside the Beltway anti-health reform traveling campaign. The purportedly grassroots organization Americans for Prosperity is currently barnstorming its way through the state of Virginia with its Hands Off My Healthcare bus tour. That's the one that features the bus with the huge bloody red handprint on it. On the Virginia bus tour, Americans for Prosperity's featured speaker is George Allen, the former Republican governor of Virginia, who's most famous nationally for an unfortunate campaign incident turned instant YouTube classic back in 2006.
It's important that we motivate and inspire people for something. This fellow here over here with the yellow shirt, Macaca, or whatever his name is.
If you've been wondering whatever happened to George Allen after the macaca thing, he has teamed up with Americans for Prosperity to hit 9 locations across Virginia over the past 2 days, with stops including spaces like Reverend Jerry Falwell's Liberty University. They're making the case at every stop about the dangers of health reform. Now, we've talked a lot about Americans for Prosperity on this program. The organization calls itself the nation's, quote, premier grassroots organization. But take that with a big honking grain of salt. It is a group based in Washington, D.C. that's staffed by political pros. The president of Americans for Prosperity is a man named Tim Phillips, who joins us in just a moment. His bio page on the AFP website brags about his time as chief of staff to Virginia Republican Bob Goodlatte. The director of Americans for Prosperity is a man named Art Pope, a multimillionaire right-wing activist who's given so much money to the Republican Party in North Carolina that they named their state headquarters after him. The man running their effort in Virginia is a man named Ben Markey, a former Tom DeLay staffer and research analyst for the National Republican Congressional Committee. Americans for Prosperity is claiming to be a grassroots group, yet it won't disclose its funders, and it is staffed by former Republican operatives. Those are the reasons why we've talked about them so many times on this show. When they campaign and organize against something like health reform, when they barnstorm states like Virginia and Arkansas, where they're headed next, to assess their impact, it would be helpful for those of us in the news business and for Americans looking at what they're doing to know if they're representing the grassroots concerns of their members, or if they're doing work for the Republican Party from which they've gleaned most of their senior staffers, or if they're just paid speakers for their funders they refuse to disclose. Well, joining us now is Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity. Mr. Phillips, it is great to have you back on the show. Thank you for agreeing to be here.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
Did I get anything wrong?
The way you're assessing AFP is off track. I mean, come on, we're a grassroots
Did I get anything factually wrong?
You did not get anything factually wrong.
Okay, but you don't like the angle.
I think the angle is unfair, and it's in all candor hypocritical.
Okay,
and I'll tell you why it's hypocritical. You say we're a corporate front group. I think you said that before in the teaser at the beginning of the show. In this healthcare battle, the real corporate front groups are funding Obamacare. The big boys, the pharmaceutical companies, they're on board with Obamacare. They're spending, published reports estimate $150 million on TV ads.
Like America's health insurance plans?
They're the big, the health insurance companies, the industry players are the ones spending big money for Obamacare.
You know that Americans health insurance plans, the industry group for the health insurance companies, is against reform and just put out that report that says it'll cause them to quadruple the rates, and they're now started a new $1 million ad campaign against the health reform
And they
proposal.
thought they had a deal cut with the Obama administration and Senator Baucus. Ironically, when you and I were together, about a month ago, during the break, one of the health insurance company ads was on supporting the health care reform coming out of Washington. I remember that very clearly, thinking, wow, what an ironic point in this discussion. So the industry big boys, they're on the other side. They've cut their deals.
Who's funding you?
We have a number of Americans across the country who are funding us. And I'll tell you, you mentioned Art Pope, and you mentioned in past times David Koch, who's our C3 chairman. Yeah. They're great Americans. They love their country. They have every right to get involved.
They're not.
And for them to be vilified and demeaned the way you just did, Art Pope, that's,
Listen,
come on,
no,
you
I'm
are
not,
too. You're inferring that they're in this for
that's not fair.
reasons.
I'm not vilifying them or demeaning them. I'm pointing out who they are, what they're tied to, and what that says about your claim that your organization is a big grassroots group. Your group is corporate funded. You're founded by the founder, the head of Koch Industries, which is an oil and chemical company, and you are staffed by experienced Republican pros, staffers. And so that doesn't comport with you maintaining that you are a grassroots group. You may have a lot of members, but you're not a grassroots group. And I think that's important for people to understand about the impact of your group.
You can have your point of view about that, but to suggest that Art Pope does not have good motives or that he's just some Republican operative, that's
Good,
what
bad,
you're
or indifferent.
though.
He's a Republican pro. He's not Johnny from the block who came up with an idea about health reform and is now trying to get his neighbors involved. I mean, grassroots doesn't mean...
That's exactly what he's doing. He's getting his neighbors involved. He's getting activists across North Carolina involved. You just described Art
his
Pope very
neighbors
well.
at
the
state Republican Party headquarters that's named after him because he's given them so much money.
And that's a bad thing. He gets involved in the political discourse of this country.
Tim,
that's a good thing.
You're genial, but you're not credible. It doesn't make sense.
That's outrageous.
No, wait,
that's an outrageous comment.
Wait, tell me how a group headed by you and Art Pope and David Koch, how that group makes sense to call itself a grassroots organization, unless you have a really different idea of what grassroots means.
Here's what grassroots is: getting Americans to get involved, to fight for their freedoms and their point of view on issues. We do that, and we do it every single day, like the bus tour you just mentioned in Virginia, North Carolina, where we're going next, Arkansas, where we're going next. You go to these events, there will be hundreds upon hundreds, in some cases thousands of good folks at these events, and they are real grassroots Americans. And to say they're not real because somehow I'm a Republican operative, we beat up Republicans all the time. I'm sure you've researched
this,
Rachel.
I'm not saying that they're not real. I'm saying that you don't tell us who's paying for you to say what you're saying, and therefore I don't trust that what you're saying actually represents a grassroots point of view. I think you have every right to participate in this, just like Art Pope does, just like David Koch and Koch Industries does. I just want to know that it's them who's paying for it.
I'm not going to, and they do, they do help pay for it. And I'm not going to expose these other folks to the kind of attacks that they'll get from the left on these blogs and elsewhere. I'm not going to do that.
I'm trying to get to the brass tacks of who you are, because you're trying to be a big player in this fight.
We're not trying to do anything other than protect the freedoms of Americans to choose our health care. Right,
and so I want
some political game.
Let me ask you this. Former Virginia Governor George Allen, one of your featured speakers on this bus tour right now, he is now the head of George Allen Strategies. It's a lobbying and consulting firm. He's on the board of directors of companies including Nanotox, Lee Technologies, and the Hillsdale Group. His lobbying firm would not disclose to us today who he lobbies for. We asked specifically whether he lobbies for any healthcare interests, and they wouldn't say yes or no. Do you know? Did you ask him who his lobbying clients were before you signed him up for the speaking tour?
George Allen is also the governor at one point of Virginia. Yeah, he has a wonderful interest in Virginia. Do you know if he
lobbies for healthcare interests?
I don't think he does. Actually, he said he does not do that, and we're not compensating him for going out and giving the message he's delivering. He's the former governor of Virginia. He's in places today and yesterday that he used to represent in the state house and Congress. I'm proud to have him there. Do you see the concern, though? And I'm not trying to attack you here. I'm trying to be very honest with you about what my concern is, and what I think a lot of people's concern is. And the concern is that you guys may be promoting a healthcare lobbyist to go tell people why health reform is a bad idea, and you're calling it grassroots. You're essentially mounting an ad campaign for the lobbying clients of this lobbyist. Oh, come on. Most of the healthcare industry is on board with Obamacare, Rachel.
But you could clear up that concern if you would tell us who your funders were, and if George Allen would tell us whether he's lobbying for healthcare interests.
You would have more credibility on this.
And your lack of disclosure makes it seem like you're a fake grassroots group run in D.C. by Republican operatives calling itself grassroots. All you have to do is disclose your funders. You
would have more credibility on this if you also called out the Obama administration and Baucus and those guys for climbing and hitching their wagon up to the pharmaceutical industry. You don't do it. Have you done that?
I was going to say, have you ever seen my show?
Have you done that?
Yeah,
Have you called on the Obama administration, the senator who was just here, to say, come on, quit this deal with the pharmaceutical industry and get a real health reform package for America? You know, I love the idea of you trying to program the Rachel Maddow show. I think this is a great... I'm a humble guest in your presence, please. Telling me what I ought to cover on the show, especially when you don't know what I have covered, is an ambitious take for you. But I want to tell you that I have just killed the next segment of our show because I'd like to continue talking to you. Do you mind sticking around? Sure, you bet.
Excellent. Tim Phillips is the head of Americans for Prosperity. Grassroots-ish and proud, according to me. Grassroots and proud, according to him. We'll be right back with Tim Phillips.